Yama, everyone. It's Ricky Spencer.
And AJ Williams, how are you all?
Lovely to be on our wonderful podcast series, Health Bites. Today, we're going to be talking with Dr. Tess Ryan, a well-known, established, leading academic who will talk to us about health and equity in the Indigenous space across the country that we're living on, and also all the current research that is happening that she is undertaking and really guide us through some issues that might be a bit contentious around cultural competency, lateral violence, and understanding health gaps. We hear so much stories, as you may know, about closing the gaps, but what does that even mean? And how do we know we've achieved it? So before we begin, let's have a big yama to Tess Ryan. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Tess.
Marangbu, thank you very much. Wiyabu, which in my language is hello, hi. My name is Tess Ryan. I'm a Biripi woman, which originates from Tari in the north coast of New South Wales there. I am an academic. I have a number of different hats that I wear. I am an academic lead under the Office of the Pro-Vice Chancellor Indigenous at the Australian Catholic University. I also work as a research associate part-time with Monash University on a project there. And I occasionally do some health editorial information with regards to Croaky Health Media, which is an online health media space. A bit about me, I come from my own sort of lived experiences with regards to both my Aboriginality and definitely lived experiences of health. I have chronic and disabling health issues. And I guess in a way I've almost sort of fallen into talking a lot about health because, I have skin in the game, as it were. And why I really enjoy doing the work that I do, especially the work that I've done with regards to Croaky, is because it's about making sure there is health equity and access for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So that's a little bit about me. I guess I'm happy to disclose my health conditions. I'm a type 1 diabetic, I have been for 30 years. I have ME/CFS, which stands for myalgic encephalomyelitis, or some people know it as chronic fatigue syndrome, although that's something that we're trying to get rid of, that term. And I also suffer from dysautonomia, specifically POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. So I spend a lot of my time trying to conserve my energies. And for a while there, I didn't think I was going to be able to continue to do the work that I do. But I found really good adaptations and places where they would still accept me doing my work pretty much from my bed and being able to conserve as much energy as I can. So that's a little bit about me in a nutshell.
That sounds like so much experience in both personal and professional, just that little summary. What got you into academia?
Oh, that's a really long story, but I only went to school to the age of 16, so to my sort of junior certificate. In the 80s, I grew up in Meanjin, Brisbane, and sorry, and yeah, so I left school and wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. Tried to do lots of different things. I worked in stage management of live theatre. I studied cinematography for a little while. I became a nanny for a little while. Then I moved to Ireland for a year, and it was while I was living in Ireland that I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I also met my future now ex-husband over there. And so then we came back to Australia, got married. I had a baby who had quite a lot of health issues at the very beginning of her life. After 5 years of marriage, we separated. And then I moved down to Canberra. I was in Canberra for quite some time and I worked in government roles occasionally and was just really floundering and everyone always said to me, "Oh, you're a really good writer, and you're really politically motivated and active, but you don't, you haven't really done anything with it." So I thought, oh, I'll go and do a foundation program with the University of Canberra.
Yeah.
And that led me to doing an undergraduate degree in communications and media studies. And through that, I just really started to write about Aboriginal issues, predominantly like in the media, but then I moved into other areas as well. So that was sort of the start of my career, and it went from there to honours to PhD.
So what was your PhD titled? What was your PhD about?
Yep, my PhD is titled Deadly Women, an analysis of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander female leadership in Australia.
Awesome.
Yeah, I interviewed around 20 women in Australia, women that led with community focus, women that led within government roles, and women that led that had a high profile. So people like, at the time it was Nova Peris when she was still in Parliament, Linda Burney, Marcia Langton, and then because I was still based in Canberra at the time, a number of people that worked in government roles there. And what I was sort of trying to show is that, quite interestingly, I think with a lot of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women, is that they lead from the shadows, and they would say, "Oh, we don't care about the big roles, like all the, we don't want to be the show ponies. We just want to get stuff done." And so you find if you go into a lot of Aboriginal community-controlled health organisations, predominantly there's going to be a lot of women in there, a lot of aunties there, really trying to get kids to follow them in their footsteps, and trying to get them to sort of then go and do a public health course or something like that, so that they then create a future for themselves. And I found that to be really interesting. So yeah, that was mainly what it was about.
Awesome. Ricki.
I was going to ask you one thing that struck me in my life and other people's life is the price you pay for disclosure, whether it be, your identity. And in recent years, we've had more talk about the living experience workforce. And, there's this need when it comes to health equity, which I know that you're heavily involved and strong. What do you think are some of the challenges that Indigenous people face when it comes to the living experience about disclosing their own health conditions?
Yeah, it's quite interesting, because I know at various times I've been told by other people that I'm too open with my health conditions, that I should not disclose as much. And I've never really believed in that. I've always felt that one of the main drivers, I think, a core driver as to why I do this, both professionally and personally, is because voice to me is really important. And my driver for living and engaging with people is, I guess, to understand and be understood. So without disclosure, that makes things kind of difficult. But with disclosure, it also makes things difficult, both in an identity as an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person, and as a quote unquote unwell, sick person. And that comes with its own challenges. I definitely think that, unfortunately, through health systems, ticking that box, as we all know, can make a difference, both in a positive and a negative vein. So assumptions come with ticking that box, and that can be really difficult when you're interacting with health clinicians. I wrote an article a few years ago, and it was about being in the inside of a waiting room at a doctor's office. and I described the different profiles of people that were there. There was an Aboriginal person, there was a female, there was an academic, there was someone with chronic health conditions. But there was only one person in the waiting room, and that's me. We all come with different intersections, right? And different lived experiences, different challenges, whether it be in regards to identity or health focus. And doctors sometimes don't see that. You walk in sometimes and they either just see a diagnosis or a set of criteria or problems, or sometimes they put a different lens on it because you are maybe Aboriginal. Or they make assumptions. Maybe you haven't got as much education. Well, I'm there and, I feel like sometimes I have to show them that, no, I have quite a lot of education. I've got a lot of medical terminology. My health literacy is pretty up there. And that maybe not is the same for other people. So one thing that I really hope that I get across in my work to health professionals is that you shouldn't be sitting down across from someone having all these different assumptions, whether it's about their cultural identity or their health identity. You really need to ask more questions to find out who they are before you make these determinations.
I'm just wondering, when you're speaking, how do you sit with vulnerability?
Oh, I know that I wear a lot of this stuff on my sleeve. And now at the age of 54, it's gotten a lot better, a lot easier. I feel like I've grown a tougher skin, but I'm still very vulnerable. I know that when I was younger, so I started university as a mature age student, always known about for instance, my Aboriginality. My mother's family moved away from country when they were quite young to avoid going on to the mission there, and then they sort of lived sort of hiding in plain sight in areas like Surrey Hills and Balmain before they were fancy suburbs. And I definitely think that has a degree of vulnerability on it. That my mother's upbringing was things like make sure you always look neat and tidy, have your socks pulled up under your knees. This was sort of in the early 50s and things like that. And she's handed that down to me. So I was an incredibly vulnerable, quiet child and really compliant. And then something happened to me as a teenager where I realised that systems didn't necessarily work in the individual's favour. And so, I was still vulnerable, but I had a bit of a fire in me. That fire has burnt and sometimes diminished throughout the years, but my vulnerability now is definitely in knowing that I can't be as active as I used to be because I have an energy deficiency with regards to ME is a cellular problem, and a mitochondrial problem. So I can't do the things I used to do. As an academic, I can't travel overseas for conferences as much and things like that. I have to do them in adaptive, different ways. And there's a vulnerability in my career with regards to that because there's an issue at the moment with universities in cutting costs, but as well as that, there's a vulnerability in myself in feeling like I'm not living up to my own expectations. So it's a really difficult thing, and I think everyone has them to varying degrees because we wouldn't be human if we didn't. But like the things I say to my now 30-year-old daughter that still acts, like sometimes like she needs her mum. So those vulnerabilities can also be strengths. So you've just got to learn how to harness them. They can still be vulnerabilities and you can still wear them on your sleeve. But you can turn that challenge into a strength and an opportunity if you work hard enough.
do you find is one of the challenges of trying to do everything that you do with a body that won't be able to, as you said, with your chronic fatigue syndrome, that stops you from doing some things that you want to do? How does that make you feel at the time, and how do other people around you see that or misinterpret what's actually happening?
Yeah, I've only been diagnosed now for about sort of 3 or so years, but I think I've had this for a long time, and I probably just put my tiredness down to the diabetes, because we can also have a bit of energy depletion with that. But it's interesting because, now where was I going with this? One of the aspects of ME is brain fog, I just have to say. And so that can make, talking about challenges, that can make academia really difficult. And so I don't work the ways I used to. How I used to work was go, go, go the whole time, and working within different structures and systems that had expectations of that neoliberal, you have to work, otherwise you don't exist. You produce, produce, produce. And in academia, we do have that publish or perish sort of aspect as well. And you need to be doing research, and you need to be showing leadership as an Aboriginal person as well. So there was a lot of grief in feeling like I'd worked so hard for so long to get to where I was, but I didn't really get to the position I wanted to, or something like that. And then I started thinking about genuinely what I do and what I love doing. And one of the things that I really love doing is talking, yarning with students and yarning through research, hearing other people's experiences, their stories and their lived experience. And one thing I think I do really well, doesn't necessarily have to be to do with academia, but it can be, and that is building other people up and empowering them to go, actually I can do this. That doesn't require a pay packet necessarily. It doesn't require a professor title. All it requires is my ability to be warm to people and, learn about them and learn about where they might feel a bit like they haven't got the confidence, and I can build that up. So it was great to realise that, and to be able to realise that and be able to see that I could still garner that and use that in my conversations. So a couple of months ago, I went to the Lowitja conference in Adelaide. Now, Lowitja is a health organisation, health institute. It's been going around now for quite a number of years. It had the largest attendance it's ever had. There was, so many people there. And it was just so lovely to go back, and people were shocked because they saw me in a wheelchair. Sometimes I have to use a wheelchair to conserve my energy because walking can just deplete me. But to be welcomed back and to see everyone and to see new faces and get to know their stories, that was such a wonderful experience, and it showed me that I hadn't really lost things. Things have just been turned down a little bit and turned up in other areas, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Things that some people fear, when they progress through the channels of academia or research or advocacy, is failure.
Yeah.
And, that's something that I struggle with sometimes with my health, because, you think you want to do so much, but then you can't do it. How does Tess negate failure, and what does failure mean to you?
I can't tell you, honestly, I've failed so many times. And it's part of the human condition. And in the past, really going way back in the past, when I didn't know enough about myself and I didn't know enough about the world, I would catastrophize and see it as the worst thing. I remember one time, this would have only been about 8 years ago, I had a panic attack while I was teaching some students or facilitating students through a program, health leaders through a program. And I was so devastated after that. I remember thinking, this is terrible. All that sort of self-talk that you do when you feel like you've let people down and then you've let yourself down. And then afterwards, I talked to people and they didn't even notice. They didn't even notice that this had happened. And I still talk to students that I used to work with years ago. And I love that. I love that they still reach out and ask me a question and so I think failure it can be really hard in the moment depending on what's happening. But I think you've got to sometimes step outside of yourself. And maybe I was lucky that I got diagnosed with ME during the sort of COVID pandemic years, because I think for everyone, those years were very introspective. The world had been turned on its axis, and what were you going to focus on then if it all felt kind of existential, and where are we going to end up? And because I'd already had an immune compromised condition, and my partner, who's a data guy, an IT guy, before COVID happened, he'd worked out how many respirators were in hospitals, how many hospital beds. He knew that something serious could possibly happen because it's just what he lives on. He lives on data. So we cloistered ourselves and protected ourselves right from the very beginning. And it gave me time to sort of stop and enjoy peace and nature and step back out into the world. We were lucky because we lived right near the water at the time. So our 5K radius was walking along the beach, watching the birds. And it really had me shifting in my views of who I was and what I can give and accomplish, and to not be so hard on myself about failure. Or I don't even like the word failure. I think maybe not reaching an expectation that you had or that somebody else had of you. And another thing that my partner gave me that's always been a fantastic pearl of wisdom, and he's like, I think that everyone needs to try to live without as many expectations, because once you set up a standard that says you must reach, then all your energy goes into that goal. And if you don't reach that goal, then a lot of sadness comes from failed expectations or missed expectations. So I think taking that out into the world and letting students know that, if you don't score well on an exam, or if you do an essay and you put a lot of heart into it and you didn't, get the score you wanted, the mark you wanted, it's okay. It doesn't mean the end of your life. You can recover from this and you can use this as an opportunity for something else.
Very wise words as well. Not one everyone follows though, but
it's hard. It's like a muscle you've got to work on, I think,
Do you think it's more pressure for students and academic staff who identify as Indigenous publicly?
Definitely there's an added, a lot of the work that we're currently trying to do at ACU is put together systems and frameworks and design that really understands that there's a lot more that goes into being Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander in a university at any stage, at the student stage, at the staff student stage, at the academic stage. There's expectations that the system puts upon us to even from a really young age, to share your story. I mean, I've seen teachers do that where they have an expectation that the Aboriginal person will share their knowledge, sometimes of traumatic stories, without even thinking that, this isn't just a teaching moment for the rest of the class. This is someone bloodletting their own trauma. And unfortunately, we all have a lot of those sorts of stories in our family lineage. So those kind of expectations, or the expectations of academics that are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander to train or lead, casually in conversation. So we're apparently the doyens of all race, and we have to do that for other people, is something that I think is really coded and laden with lots of bias, lots of discrimination, lots of pressure. That there's a lot of people out there that might just want to be an artist that happens to be Aboriginal. There was an artist, Gordon Bennett, who was out there, who was an artist who said, "I'm not an Aboriginal artist, I'm an artist that just happens to be Aboriginal." Yeah. Not every artist wants to do a dot painting or chevrons. They might do something completely different. And I think as we're moving into more of this modern, more contemporary age, we're seeing differences that are coming out that maybe were hidden previously. And I think that's a really fantastic opportunity out there. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers the question. I'm rambling a bit, sorry.
That's all right. I have a question though. Do you find lateral violence or community violence quite high in the academic space?
I think this is a really complex area and complex question. I think in the past I did, but now, having a bit more age on me and a bit more wisdom, I can delineate between things that were definitely lateral violence and things that were actually let me say, the things that were sometimes protocol, people just showing cultural protocol, and then sometimes things where people might be showing performative acts to look like they are the most knowledgeable person in the room. I never walk into a room thinking I'm the most knowledgeable. I walk into a room as an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander woman going, who's here that's really interesting to talk to, and what can they show me and teach me, and what can I hear about, what can I go. I mean, I think I get fueled by a conversation, right? So I would never want to walk into a place and go, I'm the best black fella here. And I know everything there is to know. And I have seen some people that do that. And also I think I have an understanding of psychology a little bit. So I see that as an insecurity when people do some of that sometimes. So there's a whole spectrum, I guess, within that concept of lateral violence, I think, that can occur. There is people that just are there to tell you that you're not black enough. And I've had that in workplaces before I was an academic. I've had that in school. I've had that in university. I've had that in workplaces after. Unfortunately, I think some people will always think that you're not doing enough. And then I've had people that are going, hang on, but who's your mob? And that is a cultural protocol question. Sometimes I think in the way in which we ask that question can seem quite confrontational, but sometimes it's also just our way, because we're trying to get to the information as quickly as possible. And then sometimes there's people that, as I said, believe that they have 500 years of knowledge and lineage throughout their family and will come and tell you, and they will essentialise every bit of Aboriginal culture so that if you don't know it, then you shouldn't be ticking that box. I've learnt now how to deal with those people. I had someone in a class environment do that to me as a facilitator and was doing that to other students in the class. And as I recall, I just came out and said, well, we don't talk like that here. We're in a room of, colleagues. We're in a room of friends. We could be in a room of distant cousins for all we know, because we know what, mob family lines can be like. And so we don't make those assumptions here. And straight away the student was like, oh yeah, no, I didn't mean it like that. Sometimes you just need to call it out. But if you don't sort of say, oh, that's laterally violence and you're bullying me, I think sometimes that gives them more fuel to do other things. I think the way in which to deal with it is say, we won't accept that behaviour. And that's what it doesn't happen to me as much now because some people know who I am. So, but that's the kind of tactic that I use for that these days.
Very profound. And thank you for sharing that. I mean, that personally, your living experience of that, I think encapsulates what many of us some of us have gone through, or go through, and that feeling like, how Aboriginal do you have to be before you're seen as someone of value who can contribute? Because to me, sometimes when you look at current events, it's like, I always say, why do we always argue about the oxygen when there is oxygen for everybody? But for some reason, some people feel they have to breathe more because you have to breathe less so that they can breathe more. And I never understand that because to me, it's nonsensical.
Yeah, I'm working on a research project at the moment at Monash, and it's about connection and belonging. And while we're not overtly talking about lateral violence, but we're talking about what does it mean to feel a sense of connection and feel a sense of disconnection, and what are some of the, I wouldn't say barriers, but some of the challenges. I think I can be quite socially awkward at times, even though I seem like a chatterbox. I get shy like the rest of us. And walking into rooms where you don't know how you're going to be received can be scary, and that doesn't change. I think no matter how old you get, you're still going to feel the age where you first felt that. Trauma lives in the body, so that any sort of past trauma will come up when you're feeling like people aren't accepting you. And I think what's really interesting is, yes, we know that this still exists out there, and we know that people are saying if you're not at the march every year, or if you're not at the marches on the weekend, then, you're not really with us. But I don't think they're living inside our bodies. I mean, I haven't been able to go to any of these marches for such a long time. I don't think that makes me less of an Aboriginal person. I think it makes me someone that honours my peace and still does work that can affect change. Change doesn't necessarily have to be in these massive ways. How do we shift paradigms? I've always sort of thought about this. How do we shift these paradigms in society? It's by having one-on-one conversations. You have a conversation with one person and it might sort of open their eyes up a little bit more and, change their minds a little bit. And they might spread that information out to other people. And we're seeing more Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander information coming out now. And yes, we can't ignore that there's a divisive space that is existing that's trying to push back. But you know what? They haven't got time on their side. we've got 200 plus years of this, and we're not going anywhere. So the haters or the right-wing space that wants to live in divided spaces can be there, but eventually they can't ignore us. We're there. We're not going anywhere. So paradigm shift when you have conversations with people one-on-one, and then society makes the shifts, and then the paradigm shifts. And I've always believed that. So my worth is in the talking that I do one-on-one people, and also in honouring and respecting myself and my peace, which is what my ancestors also would have expected of me. Not to constantly fight and burn myself out like I've seen lots of people do, but honour the fact that I need peace and rest and time. Rest is a form of resistance.
One word that's in my brain a lot lately, I don't know why it's coming deeply when I'm speaking to you, is the word of epistemologies. I don't know why. It's just with you both here, and I'm thinking epistemologies, and I'm thinking Indigenous knowledges. And how do you see that? Because when we're talking about, getting more of people who are Indigenous to get into health and research and lead the way so others can lean from it and take from it and develop, do you see that there is pressure upon those who are wanting to get into research to kind of come up with something that's unique and that they put a stamp on it, and that pressure of, and then you've got that pressure of, Indigenous academic, as opposed to, as you mentioned, Dr. Tess Ryan, or do we have to still situate the Indigenous at the top bit in order for it to be somehow special?
I think it depends. I know that we are currently looking at how we, I actually wrote an article a long time ago about indigenise. I didn't necessarily like that term, indigenise, but we are currently in a space where we're trying to embed more knowledges into a very Western-centred institution that is a university, and a Catholic university at that. And one of the things I did there a few years ago when I previously worked there was wrote a values and principles statement that was looking at the traumas that Western epistemological ideas and Western education and Western Catholic education had done on Aboriginal peoples, and First Nations peoples, especially sort of in Australia. And we thought that this was an important document to write because, there might be some, from that specific university, there might be some pushback from people that are like, well, I wouldn't go there because it's Catholic university. It's not like we teach scripture. We don't force people to go to mass. There's none of that there. But we felt that it was an important thing to write because every time an Aboriginal person steps into a university space, they know that they're going to have to think about epistemology. They're going to have to think about their own ways of knowing, being, doing, just as themselves, and then themselves as an Aboriginal person or Torres Strait Islander person. And then they're going to have to think of what's often called Western ideas, but some of this stuff has also been stolen from from a lot of other places as well. So there's always going to have to be a mix. Of course, when we're talking about quantitative research, maybe in sciences or STEM-based subjects, sometimes Aboriginality is never going to come into it. I know people that do cancer research and like cellular cancer research. So the cellular parts that they're talking about, that's biology. It's not, whether you're Aboriginal or not isn't coming into it, unless, of course, they were specifically looking at the cellular derivatives and all that sort of stuff within cancer research of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So they're not going to necessarily have an expectation that their epistemology has to be within their work. But it's important for students to come in and think about how they think. And this is actually, they call it metacognition. How do you think about how you think? It's a big question. I always grew up, even before I knew these words, thinking about people should have equality. And I had a father who was a staunch Labor advocate at the time in the 60s and 70s when that was a much bigger thing, I think, who was, a union supporter, and he always looked out for the little guy. He was a white Irish Australian man, and our family was like the United Nations. We had aunties and uncles that were from former Yugoslavia. We had Malta, we had Asia, we had Aboriginal. So it was we had that sort of worldview kind of belief, and no one was judged by their culture or the colour of their skin. That's what has led me to caring about other people and how people navigate through their life. That's my core epistemology. Then the Aboriginal stuff, and then the health stuff, and then the Western-based, so-called Western-based stuff comes in for me. That's how I view it. But it's also taken years of growing that muscle. It's like going to the gym, not that everyone wants to, and I definitely can't do anymore, but you've got to exercise some of those muscles. You've got to read, you've got to absorb, you've got to have your eyes open to what's going on around you in the world and think about how you think about things. I'm getting very heavy here. I'm sorry.
Good. I am watching the time, and I know that we've only got a few minutes left. But Ricki, any other questions for Tess?
I guess for you, Tess, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
That's a big question, and I'm not sure because, once again, the body will tell me what to do, and I think listening to your body is really important. However, I'm very happy and comfortable where I am right now, personally and professionally. I love what I do. I love that I have found an institution that will allow me to work mostly from home, mostly, when I can. They value my knowledge, and if I can continue to give, information and give encouragement here, that's what I will do. But whether or not I'm working, I will still continue to do that. I've always thought about writing a book. It's always been my dream. And so that might be something that I look at doing down the track. But whether it will be a book that is based purely on academia, I don't think so. I think it's about the world, and it's about how you navigate, how you feel through these spaces. I don't think enough of that is written, and we need to think about that, and we need to think about stronger advocacy for people that might not be able to just jump out of bed in the morning, put on their clothes and go out and represent who they are in safe ways. So that's what I want to continue to do.
I want to say thank you very much, Tess, for joining us today. I'm in a more, this is listening to you, this could go on for a lot longer. But I want to add one thing. One thing you are known for is your glasses. Anyone who goes, I test with the glasses, yes. Where do you get the glasses from? Any
I found an online place called Eyekeeper.
Yeah.
Actually, that's another condition that I have. I do have diabetic proliferative retinopathy. So whilst I my vision's not bad, but I'm getting old. So getting old, I need to wear glasses, and you've got to do it in style, right? So I found this company, Eye Keeper, that do both prescriptions and readers, and they have in all different colours. So I just think it's a part of my personality. I wake up one morning and I go, I think I'll wear pink today, or I think I'll wear green. And it's just a fun thing to be able to do. So why not express yourself?
Thank you. Thanks. Ricki,
It's been an absolute pleasure, Tess. I'm at awe of you. I think so much of you. You're somebody who gives a lot. You are non-judgmental. You've accepted me, and I mean that's my own bias coming through, but I think we can all learn a lot from your learnings, and you're so generous with your time, but we could have said all the wonderful things that you've written, and there's a plethora of your writings, but all I can suggest to our audience is please, Google Tess Ryan, reach out to Tess Ryan if you've got ideas for funding, and even say hello and thank you. I want to give you a big thank you, Tess, for your one thing I'm big on is disclosure. And you've given us that opportunity. You shared a part of yourself, your vulnerable self, to us and our audience. And from all of us, we thank you.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. And yes, if anyone ever wants to try and get in touch with me, please try and reach out, because I love sharing what I know and I love talking to people. So thanks again.
Thanks, Tess. And thanks, guys. And we'll see you at the next podcast.